Listen closely, my brothers and sisters. On September 12, 2025, a sound thundered through Burkina Faso, but it wasn't the sound of warplanes, nor the sound of destruction. It was the roar of engines, the ignition of 764 brand new road construction machines rolling out across every region of the nation. For the people of Burkina Faso, it was more than just the delivery of machines. It was the delivery of freedom. Imagine this: no IMF loans, no World Bank contracts, no begging Paris or Washington for permission. Instead, a 37-year-old soldier, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, stood in his signature beret and told his nation, "We will build with our own hands." And then he proved it. Billions of CFA francs worth of heavy-duty machines paid for with African wealth were handed to the people. Bulldozers, graders, concrete mixers, trucks, all ready to carve thousands of kilometers of new roads every year. Roads that will connect the forgotten villages to the cities, farmers to markets, and children to hospitals. This was not a photo opportunity. It was a declaration of war against dependency, against the debt traps that have strangled Africa for generations. And make no mistake, leaders from Dakar to Nairobi are watching, some with pride, others with fear, because Traoré's actions scream one undeniable truth: Africa does not need Western handouts to rise. Now here's the question I want to ask you. Do you believe this young African leader against all odds can succeed where so many before him were silenced? Can we trust that this new road revolution is more than just concrete and steel, that it is the very path to sovereignty? Please share if you feel you are among the first to witness and support President Ibrahim Traoré's bold stand. And subscribe if you believe, as I do, that the truth is far more important than the headlines. On the morning of September 12, 2025, the streets of Ouagadougou were alive with anticipation. Citizens lined the roads as convoys of heavy-duty machines rumbled forward, each painted in the bright colors of a nation refusing to bow. There were bulldozers, graders, concrete mixers, massive dump trucks, cranes towering like giants, all rolling into the hands of local communities. In total, 764 machines valued at billions of CFA francs were officially handed over by President Ibrahim Traoré himself. For the people, this wasn't just another government announcement. It was a living, breathing revolution. In a continent where aid convoys from the IMF or the World Bank often come chained with contracts, this moment felt different. There were no foreign logos stamped on the machinery, no speeches delivered in the language of former colonizers. Instead, there was the voice of a young African leader declaring, "These roads will be built by us for us." Under the Faso Mayabo presidential initiative, Traoré outlined his plan. These machines will not gather dust in government depots. They will be deployed across every region from the arid north near Dori to the lush west around Bobo Dioulasso. The goal is nothing less than 3,000 to 5,000 kilometers of new roads every year. That means a farmer in a remote village who once carried produce on foot for days will now load his harvest onto a truck and reach the market in hours. It means a mother rushing a sick child to the hospital won't lose precious time on dangerous dirt paths. The symbolism of this handover was undeniable. Traoré didn't just deliver steel and diesel, he delivered dignity. Each machine was a hammer striking against the chains of dependency that have bound Africa for generations. For decades, leaders paraded imported bulldozers financed by Western loans, often leaving behind half-finished roads, abandoned bridges, and pockets full of kickbacks. This time was different. These machines were purchased with Burkina Faso's own resources, funded through the nationalization of gold mines and a redirection of wealth back to the people. Citizens cheered not just because they saw machines, but because they saw themselves reflected in them. Youth from vocational schools had already been trained to operate graders and mixers. Local engineers were preparing project plans. Truck drivers signed contracts that promised real wages, not empty promises. It was in every sense development by the people and for the people. Observers couldn't ignore the contrast. In Ghana, Kenya, and Nigeria, frustration simmers as governments lean on foreign aid, leaving citizens to wonder why their leaders still kneel to former colonizers. Yet here, in one of the world's poorest countries, a new narrative was unfolding. Burkina Faso was showing that Africa's wealth, when reclaimed and reinvested, could pave not only roads, but a future of sovereignty. This first batch of 764 machines was only the beginning. Traoré announced that 3 more shipments are on the way, meaning thousands of additional units will soon reinforce this transformation. Already, the first batch deployed in early 2025 has begun laying down roads with reports of 3,000 kilometers completed in less than a year. Villages once cut off are now linked, markets are thriving, and communities are beginning to believe in something long denied them progress without conditions. And there was something else in the air that morning, a quiet but unshakable defiance. As Traoré handed the keys to local representatives, he wasn't just distributing equipment. He was sending a message across the continent: Africa does not need to beg to rise. The roar of the engines that day was more than noise, it was a declaration. A declaration that Burkina Faso would no longer be trapped in the cycle of aid and debt. A declaration that roads, schools, and hospitals would be built not as gifts from foreign powers, but as the rightful work of an independent people. And above all, it was a declaration that this young leader intends to deliver tangible concrete change, not speeches, but pavement, not promises, but proof. The handover of 764 machines was not just a domestic event, it was a spark that ignited conversations, fears, and hopes across Africa and beyond. In Ouagadougou, the crowd erupted in cheers. Farmers, teachers, students, ordinary people saw more than construction vehicles. They saw weapons of liberation. Yet, in boardrooms from Dakar to Nairobi and in foreign embassies from Paris to Washington, the mood was very different. What happened on September 12th looked less like an economic policy and more like a declaration of independence from a world order built on debt. The climax of this story lies not in the machines themselves, but in what they represent. For the first time in decades, a leader of a small landlocked African nation stood up and said, "We will build with our own resources. We will not kneel." Traoré did not just give out keys, he gave out courage. He transformed bulldozers into symbols of sovereignty. But with such defiance comes danger. Intelligence reports whispered that Traoré has already survived more than 18 assassination attempts since taking power in 2022. Each failed plot only adds to his legend. Supporters call him the incarnation of Sankara and Lumumba, men whose lives were cut short because they dared to dream of an Africa free from colonial chains. Now, with Burkina Faso becoming the security headquarters of the Sahel Alliance AES, the stakes are even higher. If Traoré were silenced, many fear the entire movement could collapse, pushing Africans back into despair. Across the region, reactions came swiftly. In Mali, Colonel Assimi Goïta praised the move, calling it proof that Africans can fund their own revolutions. In Niger, President Abdourahmane Tiani declared that Burkina Faso's path is our path. The three Sahel nations, bound together by the alliance of Sahel states, celebrated as if one nation had won a collective victory. Their citizens flooded social media with images of tractors and graders tagging them as revolution on wheels. But not everyone was celebrating. In Accra, Abuja, and Nairobi, political elites shifted uneasily in their imported suits. They understood what this meant. If Burkina Faso could achieve progress without IMF loans, their own people would start asking uncomfortable questions. Why must we still sign contracts with Paris? Why do we beg Washington for aid when our own soil is rich with gold, oil, and uranium? Western powers too reacted with thinly veiled hostility. General Michael Langley, the U.S. commander for Africa, warned in a statement that regional instability is being fueled by dangerous populist leaders. His words barely concealed the reality: Washington sees Traoré as a threat not because of instability, but because he is proving Africa can function outside their orbit. In Paris, government officials expressed concern over Burkina Faso's direction while quietly acknowledging that their access to African gold and uranium was slipping away. Meanwhile, Russia's presence loomed large in the background. Many observers admitted that without Moscow's diplomatic and military backing, Traoré might not have lasted this long. Unlike France or the United States, Russia presented itself not as a master, but as a shield, arming Burkina with drones and training, providing enough leverage to deter direct interventions. For the first time in modern history, a young African leader could openly defy the West and still survive beyond 2 years in power. For ordinary Africans, the symbolism was electrifying. On TikTok, youth hailed Traoré as Africa's Che Guevara. Diaspora communities across Europe and America shared videos of the machines rolling out with captions like "Mother Africa is awake." In living rooms from Harlem to Paris's immigrant suburbs, older generations whispered the names of Lumumba and Sankara, saying, "Maybe this time the dream will live." The climax reached its emotional peak when Traoré stood before the gathered crowd, keys in hand, and declared, "Africa belongs to Africans." We will not exist as beggars, but as builders. His calm, measured tone carried more force than any shout. It was the moment when hope, fear, and defiance collided. Supporters felt a surge of pride, opponents felt the ground shift beneath their feet, and somewhere in the offices of foreign intelligence agencies, men in suits marked his name in red ink once more. This is the paradox of the moment. A fleet of machines meant to build roads has instead built a crossroads for Africa's future. One path leads to sovereignty, the other back to subjugation. The reactions tell us everything. The people are ready to rise, but the powers that profit from Africa's weakness are just as ready to strike back. The sight of 764 road construction machines lined up under the Burkina Faso sun was more than a spectacle, it was a promise made real. And that promise is already reshaping lives in ways far deeper than asphalt and concrete. For ordinary citizens, the immediate benefits are tangible. Farmers in Dori, who once watched half their millet rot before reaching distant markets, now envision trucks driving freshly harvested grain to Bobo Dioulasso in record time. A mother in the small town of Kaya, faced with the terror of her child's sudden fever, no longer wonders if the road to the nearest clinic will cost her child's life. For them, these roads are not statistics, they are lifelines. Youth long trapped in cycles of unemployment are also finding purpose. Vocational schools have begun training operators for graders and bulldozers. Young men and women once resigned to leaving their villages in search of work abroad now sign contracts that place them at the heart of rebuilding their homeland. Every kilometer of road laid becomes a testament that development can create jobs where despair once ruled. But the civil impact stretches beyond economics. It is changing how people see their government. For decades, politics in Burkina Faso was marked by distance, the elite in Ouagadougou deciding, the countryside waiting. Now, with machines deployed to every region, power feels decentralized. Citizens sense that the state is no longer a distant master but a partner. The symbolism of the president handing keys directly to local representatives has reignited trust. For many, this is the first time they believe the phrase "by the people, for the people" belongs to them. Politically, the consequences are profound. Traoré's legitimacy is no longer derived only from the military barracks that brought him to power in 2022, but from visible results on the ground. When roads begin connecting remote villages, when markets flourish, when jobs appear, he transforms from a transitional leader into a statesman. His critics, who dismissed him as another soldier in fatigues, now face the difficult task of explaining why a country once considered one of the poorest is suddenly building faster than many of its wealthier neighbors. Beyond Burkina's borders, the ripple effect is undeniable. In Ghana, Nigeria, and Kenya, whispers grow louder. If Burkina Faso can build without the IMF, why can't we? Citizens in these countries, weary of austerity programs and endless foreign loans, are beginning to demand the same independence. Political elites sense the danger. They understand that Traoré's model, if it spreads, could dismantle the very foundation of their partnerships with former colonial powers. The Sahel Alliance, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, emerges stronger in this context. By demonstrating not just defiance, but concrete achievements, Burkina becomes the spearhead of a new political bloc. ECOWAS, once dominant in West Africa, looks increasingly irrelevant as its sanctions and threats falter against a coalition delivering real progress to its people. Internationally, Burkina Faso's transformation is recasting its image. Once dismissed as a fragile, landlocked state, it now stands as a symbol of Pan-African resilience. The machines are no longer just tools of construction, they are instruments of political messaging. They say to the world, we are no longer passive recipients of aid. We are authors of our destiny. This is the true civil and political revolution, not a revolution of speeches or ideology, but of trust, rebuilt between government and governed, of sovereignty reclaimed kilometer by kilometer. It is proof that in Africa, leadership grounded in action can reverse decades of disillusionment. From Washington to Brussels, the images of 764 road machines being handed over in Burkina Faso did not look like infrastructure, they looked like rebellion. In the United States, officials framed their concerns in the language of stability. General Michael Langley, head of U.S. Africa Command, spoke of populist threats destabilizing the region. But beneath the diplomatic wording lay a deeper fear. If Burkina Faso could finance thousands of kilometers of roads without a single IMF loan, the very foundation of U.S. influence in Africa would be shaken. For decades, Washington's leverage has rested on aid packages and debt negotiations. Traoré's model bypasses both. That is why policymakers quietly describe him not as a partner, but as a problem. Across the Atlantic, France and the European Union faced an even more direct challenge. For generations, France maintained its grip on former colonies through the CFA franc system and by siphoning gold and uranium. Burkina Faso's bold step funding national projects with nationalized resources threatens to unravel that arrangement. In Paris, analysts admitted privately that if this spreads, France's role in Africa is finished. European leaders worry not only about losing access to resources, but also about losing political credibility. For them, Traoré's machines are dangerous, precisely because they prove Africa can build without Europe. Meanwhile, Russia positioned itself as the unexpected guarantor of this revolution. By supplying drones, training, and diplomatic cover, Moscow has given Traoré the breathing space to defy the West. In Kremlin halls, Burkina Faso's defiance is framed as a victory for multipolarity. Moscow portrays itself not as a benefactor, but as an enabler, insisting that Africa must lead its own projects. This alignment strengthens the Sahel Alliance's confidence and complicates Western strategies. China, watching closely, faces its own dilemma. For years, Beijing's model in Africa relied on massive infrastructure loans, the roads and rails for resources approach. Yet Traoré's example suggests an alternative building with internal wealth. If African states adopt this model, China risks losing its dominant role in infrastructure diplomacy. At the same time, Beijing sees opportunities to collaborate with leaders like Traoré on equal footing, without the debt-heavy contracts that have sparked criticism in recent years. On a global level, Burkina Faso's move resonates far beyond West Africa. In Latin America, commentators compared Traoré to leaders who once defied the IMF and paid the price. In the Caribbean diaspora, communities celebrated his stand as a revival of black sovereignty. Even in parts of Asia where memories of colonial exploitation remain raw, Burkina's machines were hailed as proof that small nations can reclaim control of their futures. The symbolism also struck deeply in the African diaspora in the United States. From Harlem to Atlanta, conversations erupted. If Burkina Faso can do this, what excuse do our own leaders have? Older generations remembered the assassinations of Lumumba and Sankara, wondering if this time history might bend differently. Younger activists lit up TikTok and X with hashtags like African Rise and Ibrahim Traoré effect, framing Burkina Faso as the epicenter of a continental awakening. This is why the world is watching so closely. For America and Europe, the risk is losing the tools of leverage they have relied on for decades. For Russia and China, the opportunity is to support an alternative model. For Africans everywhere, the message is unmistakable. Sovereignty is not a dream, it is being built kilometer by the hands of their own people. As the engines of those 764 machines continue to roar across Burkina Faso, one thing is clear: this is more than a road project. It is a revolution laid in stone and asphalt. Each kilometer built is a rejection of dependency. Each bridge raised is a defiance of centuries of exploitation. But let us not deceive ourselves, such defiance comes with a cost. History reminds us that when African leaders dared to reclaim sovereignty, they were targeted. Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, Muammar Gaddafi, all silenced before their visions could take full root. Today, Ibrahim Traoré faces the same storm. More than 18 assassination attempts have already failed, yet the threats remain. The West has lost too much to simply walk away, and the corrupt elites within Africa will not give up their privileges without a fight. The machines may be rolling, but so are the forces of sabotage. That is why this moment is both inspiring and dangerous. If Burkina Faso succeeds, it will light a fire across the continent. From Harare to Dakar, people will ask, why not us? If it fails, the message will be used to crush hope. You see, Africans cannot govern themselves without Western aid. This is the battlefield not just of roads, but of ideas, of narratives, of destiny. And so I turn the question back to you. Do you believe that President Ibrahim Traoré's reforms are truly enough to build a lasting foundation of independence? Can he withstand the weight of history, the pressure of foreign powers, and the betrayal of Africa's own puppets? Or will another voice of freedom be silenced before its time? For my brothers and sisters in America and around the world, especially those over 60 who have seen generations of promises broken, this moment is different. It is not talk, it is action. Roads are being built, jobs are being created, sovereignty is being reclaimed. But only if we pay attention, only if we support the truth, only if we refuse to let history repeat itself. Please share this message if you feel you are among the first to witness and support President Ibrahim Traoré's bold vision. Comment below. Do you trust him? Or do you believe someone else must one day carry the torch? And subscribe if you believe, as I do, that truth matters more than headlines and that Africa's renaissance belongs to all who refuse to kneel. Because make no mistake, the era of silence is over. The roads of Burkina Faso are not just paving villages to cities. They are paving Africa's path to freedom.